sessions. So yay. So if you you know anyone who would like to sort of see this session afterwards, the link will be available through Writers SA website as well as on Adelaide Fringe AVR, and obviously you can also look back on it later. So I'll hand over to you, Alysha, but thank you so much everyone, and have a great festival. Cheers.
Beautiful. So let's do it. So you're all here because you want to be part of this conversation, which is fantastic. So this conversation is about creating regional opportunities, collaborations, opportunities to share our work, etc. I do want to acknowledge that we are, all of us, wherever we are on Aboriginal land, unceded Aboriginal land. Writers SA is based on the lands of the Kaurna people, but I'm actually coming to you from the Riverland on the lands of River Murray and Mallee people, Irrawarra country. And you're all coming to us from different places. So if you do want to pop in the chat where you are and whose land you're on, that would be lovely. It's always actually nice on these kind of online spaces to see where everyone is and to see that web of connection and all of the different lines connecting us wherever we are. Wherever we are, I do want to pay respect to elders past and present, and my own personal commitment to continuing to discover and understand what it means to build a future together, a future that has to acknowledge our complicated histories and what it means to actually walk together gently on country and care for country, waters, people, spirit. I am Alysha. I'm from Writers SA, as it says on my little screen there. I'm the statewide regional manager, and we've pulled together this conversation because regional conversations matter to me. I'm a regional artist, I'm a regional maker, and we want to always be going, hey, how can we create more connections between artists wherever they are, between regional and urban, between different regions. So, these conversations like this are a part of that ongoing work, and it's not work that you just kind of do once and it ends. It has to be an ongoing conversation. So today will be that. It will be a part of an ongoing conversation. It might be a new conversation for some, and wherever you're up to is totally fine. I will get each of the three panelists in a second to introduce themselves and give us a bit of context about where they're coming from. But just for a little bit of background, one of the reasons we wanted to do this session is that Writers SA this year is doing a new dedicated regional program, a set of regional programming actually, that is mostly around young writers, but also about writers and storytellers of any age in the regions. And so for us, it was an opportunity to go, hey, let's bring together some great other people from the regions and talk about how we could maybe seed some new stories that we might want to tell next year for Adelaide Fringe. So that's, I guess, just to be open about some of my agenda, right? Like what are some stories that we want to start telling or showcasing next year or in future years? So I'm going to now pass over to Eliza, if you just want to introduce yourself and a bit of context about the particular hat you're wearing today, because you have a couple of different hats, and then throw back to me. That'd be lovely.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Eliza. I'm coming to you from Bungalow Country here in Port Lincoln. So I work with Writers SA as well as the Eyre Peninsula Coordinator, but today I'm wearing my hat as Salt Festival Coordinator. So Salt is a festival that happens here on the Eyre Peninsula. So in addition to that, I'm also a visual artist, writer and creative producer.
Beautiful. I'll pass over to Louise now.
Hi everyone, my name's Louise Adams, and I'm coming from, I'm here in Bowen-Dick Country, Mount Gambier, and yes, I'm the Artistic Program Manager for Fringe Mount Gambier. We are a regional fringe festival that started in 2017, and 2020 didn't happen, as I'm sure is the case in lots of places. But yeah, we're as many festivals navigating the spaces of the new climate, ever-changing climate, and yeah, just doing what we can to support artists that live regionally, and also bringing in visiting artists and building those pathways and experiences for regional audience and community. So.
Beautiful. And we'll hear a bit more about Mount Gambier Fringe and Salt Festival during the panel, obviously. But Michal, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I am Michal. I live in Whyalla, which is also on Bungalow Country, like Eliza, but a few hours down the road. Currently, I'm sitting in Adelaide outside the art gallery, though, because I've been here to see a few fringe shows. But I am a theatre maker, but I'm also involved in the Whyalla Art Festival, which is also part of the regional Fringe on Tour yeah, and I'm on the committee for that.
Beautiful. So a bit of context for everyone and where they are. Such a good point about the like two places, but both being on Bungalow country, but really far away. So, you know, with people that don't know the Eyre Peninsula, they kind of go, oh yeah, it's just one region, but all of those bits of the region are very different from each other. And that's true of all of the places we're in. The Riverland's very different from Mount Gambier. Mount Gambier is very different from Port Lincoln. So, you know, the main thing I hope you might take away, if you're not already working regionally, is that regional communities are not all the same. They're not, you know, homogenous. They're very different. Lovely. I also just wanted to say, actually, those of you that have been able to get to any Adelaide Fringe stuff over the weekend, would love it if you wanted to pop your recommendations in the chat so that we can get some hot tips about shows we should see when we happen to be in town. Or if, you know, if you've got a show, if your friend's got a show, it's really great to hear some of that as well. But let's have a little bit of a chat about those three festivals that you've just mentioned first, and then we might get into some other kind of nitty gritty. Eliza, can you just share a little bit, first of all, about the Salt Festival, what it is, how it works, and how artists can present their work as part of Salt Festival? What's the actual way of getting that to happen?
Yeah, sure. So Salt Festival is a 10-day festival that happens here on the southern Eyre Peninsula. So we mentioned before that the Eyre Peninsula is really large. So important to note that Salt Festival kind of just focuses on Port Lincoln and a 50k radius around Port Lincoln. So the festival is about art, creativity, innovation and culture. We're about to head into our fifth Salt Festival, and it's a mixture of mostly open access festival, so artists can apply and we run an application process each year. And then we also curate a small selection of shows that are part of the program as well as a committee. So yeah, there's sort of two modes to getting involved with Salt Festival, but the most common is that open access, applying to be part of it. Yeah.
And what sort of things would you say artists need to think about in terms of presenting work on Salt? Like what sort of work is going to best land in that context, and what might people want to think about?
Yeah, so I suppose one of the benefits to presenting in my community, at least during a festival, is that community tend to be a little bit more open to try something a bit different. So there is a bit more flexibility there, but I would still say that shows that land tend to have quite a broad appeal, or very relatable themes and content. So, you know, a show with lots of references to Adelaide or certain suburbs or something isn't going to land that well, because people just don't know them, they don't know the little nuances of that place. So they tend to, might not go as well. But also shows that are easy to explain, because audiences aren't as exposed to different sorts of things happening all the time around them, or just seeing them and absorbing them through osmosis. So yeah, those easy to explain, broad appeal shows tend to land quite well.
And what sort of audience does come to Salt?
Yeah, so it's a mixture of a local audience and a visiting audience. So the festival happens during the April school holidays. So the benefit of that being that a lot of people visit the Eyre Peninsula and the Southern Eyre Peninsula during that time, just because nice weather and go to the beach and just hang out. So there's visiting audiences who come for the festival and just come for a nice time. And then there's a local audience who like to get involved. The local audience are really, really enjoy Salt, and they grab the opportunity with both hands to get into some different things.
Beautiful. I definitely want to go visit Salt Festival in the school holidays. Port Lincoln's so beautiful. And if people want to know more about Salt Festival in particular and have a bit of a chat about their shows, they should contact you.
Yeah, best to contact me through any of the Salt Festival channels, or via email.
Beautiful. All right, might pass to you, Louise, just to talk a little bit about Fringe Mount Gambier. And again, like, how do people actually get involved if they wanted to present their work at Fringe Mount Gambier, say next year or the year after? How do they do it? What's the mechanism? What kind of shows land, etc.?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know why my glasses are fogging up. I'm probably just nervous. It's definitely not humid in Mount Gambier, so this is no indication of that. So Fringe Mount Gambier, I guess similar to what Eliza was saying, we are an open access festival. I forgot to mention before, because I'm in massive Fringe festival mode, but I'm actually an artist as well. I've done about 11 years as an Adelaide Fringe artist, and it was actually my first ever performance as an artist. So I think that open access element of what makes Fringe is something that I feel very strongly about. And I guess my involvement in the festival initially came about as an advocate for the festival and for Fringe, and passing on that knowledge and experience to other artists, venues, and people in the community who maybe didn't have a full understanding of what Fringe was. And yeah, so I guess I just bring that up to really sort of point out that open access element of Fringe to me is, and to my fellow committee members and for the festival, it's a really strong part of what makes Fringe Mount Gambier, and realistically probably Fringes all around the world. I would say it's a big factor. For many artists, we often get asked, how do we get involved? And I think a lot of artists, if they're not familiar with the Fringe format, they think it's an application, it's a curated thing. And so I think that when they realise that it is an open access festival, and if you've got an idea or a dream for an event, whether you're an artist, a producer, a venue, you can get involved. And I think, that's a really powerful thing in the artistic world, that chance to be able to try things out. And yeah, so that's a really big factor for us as a festival as well. Again, probably influenced by my own experiences as an audience member and an artist with Adelaide Fringe, and also Edinburgh Fringe, which I was fortunate to go to a couple of times. I think it's also important in a regional community, but probably anywhere, to have an element of free content. And so what Fringe Mount Gambier has done since the beginning is we have a large scale free event to make the arts and the artists that are part of the festival as accessible as we can. So we have sort of that dual model. So typically that means we have a curated free public event as the opening of the festival, and then that's followed with the 9 days of ticketed, generally ticketed open access events, but there are also some free events splattered amongst that. So Fringe Mount Gambier, I think a lot of what Eliza was saying probably applies for us as well. I think in terms of what sort of shows land during the festival, definitely, I think for newer venues or, venturing into it for the first time, I find myself typically saying like comedy, cabaret, those sorts of events can be easily explained to audiences with promo and messaging, and they tend to land quite well with a broad appeal. But also, like Eliza was saying, I think the beauty of Fringe is that audiences and community members' eyes and ears are open for new experiences. So at our curated event, we often use that to introduce not new, but diverse art experiences as we can find for audiences. And that can be, physical theatre and circus is always really popular with families, and, just don't get to see those things very often. Sort of quirky or small theatre productions can work really well. Unfortunately, we don't get probably enough of those coming to Mount Gambier. I'd like to see more of that. But yeah, we tend to use the opening night free event as a bit of a platform. One example of that is we had Yummy, which is a premier sort of drag show, come as a headliner in 2019. And we found that the response to that was massive. And then since then, we've seen local drag shows happening throughout the year when they can with COVID, because I think for those artists that live here regionally, they've been inspired, they've seen the response to a show like Yummy, and it's driven them to put on their own show, and they sell out every time. So my next step with them is to encourage them with pathways to go to Adelaide Fringe or to Unearth or Salt or Melbourne, because I think for a lot of regional artists, they don't sometimes see those as opportunities that are in their reach. But yeah, so there's sorry, I'm probably rambling a little bit.
Totally okay. And it's
feel
such a
free
great...
to rein me in. I can talk Fringe all day, but yeah.
Louise, I was just going to say, it's such a great comment actually about how bringing something that maybe hasn't been in our communities before can then also seed a whole bunch of inspiration for artists that live there. And absolutely. I actually think that's, I'm going to come back to you, but I actually think that's a really nice segue just for Michal to talk a little bit about the fact that you are in Adelaide right now, seeing and soaking up shows. And you've obviously, I know a bit about your practice, but you have taken shows from Whyalla to the Adelaide Fringe, as well as, had shows obviously as part of Unearth. So can you just talk a little bit about that in terms of the impact that it does have and why it is so important to see different kinds of work from a regional perspective and what that means?
Yeah, I think as a regional artist, so in 2019, before 2019, a youth arts organisation in Wales called D-Faces, who do some great stuff and have worked with some amazing artists, produced a show that was a concept made up by young people we staged an alien invasion in Whyalla. So that was put on during Unearth, and I wasn't involved in that production. I was overseas at university at the time. But the Adelaide Fringe team actually saw that show and supported us to take that to Adelaide, and we produced it at Adelaide Fringe. And that was my first year back in Australia. We did that show right at the start of that year. And it was really empowering as an artist to be involved in such a huge project. We got really great reviews. We sold out almost all of our shows, and we took this huge group of 17 kids to Adelaide and got these big houses all staying together and did this big show together. So as an artist, I always knew Fringe existed. I knew that I could do a Fringe show, but it still didn't feel like an easy, accessible thing to do. And then last year, for the first time, I self-produced a Fringe show, also with a group of young people who were it was a much smaller group than Area 53. We had much less funding to go. But yeah, I took a show that I had written and that I had directed. And I probably wouldn't have done that if I hadn't had that opportunity to go and do Area 53. And then we also produced that at Unearth, did a show there. So yeah, I think it's really important to have these regional festivals, to have a chance to present the work we make in our own communities, to have people come from outside the communities to see that great things are happening in regional spaces, and that we do have interesting, exciting things to say about the world. Which, yeah, and it's really hard as a regional artist because you don't have a lot of places, and it is really hard to sell your work to regional audiences outside of the festival context.
One of the things I sometimes talk about is for regional artists, one of the challenges is that there's not as many foyers to accidentally meet people in. So you have to engineer all of that. You have to make those connections happen. So we had a question in the comment in the chat, and I think it was from when we were talking about Salt Festival, but I'll ask it for all three of the festivals, just about the specifics of the demographics that come in terms of audience. So like, is it older audiences, like grey nomads? Is it family audiences? Is it young people? And so, yeah, if you could just share a little bit about the kinds of audiences that tend to come to that festival, so Salt, Unearth and Fringe Mount Gambier, but also maybe the kinds of audiences you don't see and you'd like to see might be useful as well. So we might start with you, Eliza.
Yeah, I think Salt Festival has quite a broad demographic in terms of age groups. So just thinking about the shows that we curate. So last year, we made a conscious effort to make sure that different demographics were going to be addressed in that, in our program of what we were putting on. So yeah, we did some shows with the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra, and we had a lot of older people come to those, but also a lot of families. And then we had a kids show as well to attract kids and families. And then we have a show we call Salt Stage, which is a music show, and that tends to attract sort of like a mid-range, quite a broad range, but a mid-range of ages. So yeah, the shows, there's no sort of set demographic that it attracts. It just depends on the show, really.
Yeah, I expect that's probably pretty similar across the board, but anything specific for Fringe Mac Gambia, Louise?
Yeah, I think like we definitely, with the curated event, like the free event, we keep in mind that it is a family friendly event, but we do also try to push the boundary a little bit as well as the evening goes on. So we get a bit of a rolling audience through there. Definitely, a lot of families earlier in the evening, and then yeah, probably a more mature crowd as the night goes on. But yeah, so we use that curated event to really try to hit as many diverse genres as we can, and appeal to a really broad audience. I think that's one thing that the festival has done really well, is it's captured a really broad audience of City of Mount Gambier, which is, our largest regional city in SA. And then with our open access events, there's a bit of, basically if we see that there's a bit of a gap somewhere, we will approach artists and try to encourage them to bring a ticketed show down. There's definitely a lot of that support involved in the open access events as well. It's not, particularly with visiting artists as well, because it's not just a matter of, I'm just going to come and present in Mount Gambier. If they haven't ever been there, they don't know the demographic and all of that. So we work on that, a lot of support with those first timers as much as we can, and then hope that they come back to the festival. Like we've had some artists like Tash York, After Hours Cabaret Club, Jason Pestel, like that come back for repeated years. And so I think that's sort of what we aim to develop there. But yeah, in terms of the demographic, it is pretty broad. Children's shows typically do quite well, and I would say that probably the average age for attending ticketed events would be in your 20s, 30s, 40s, if they can get babysitters, probably 50s as well. And the other thing that Fringe Mac Gambier has done, we sort of launched it last year, is we do a Fringe outreach program. So now we're targeting aged care centres, which has been quite the challenge this year. It was a success last year, but yeah, we're targeting visiting artists who are down for either ticketed events or the curated event. We get them into those centres, and also some of our more vulnerable community groups, in terms of disability, mental health and homelessness. So we're trying to reach into different demographics, and I guess a lot of the reasoning behind that is, getting artists in front of as many different community groups in the region, but also for artists, giving them as many performance opportunities as well. It's a really big thing. I'm not sure where everyone is here in the panel, where they're from, but for visiting artists to make sure that any risk that you're taking to travel down here, if you've got a couple of performance opportunities, it can really help alleviate that risk. So again, I've probably rambled, but
Not at all, Louise. And, I think that last comment's really important as well. And I just want to hone in on it for a second, but that opportunity to think, if you are touring regionally, and I'm sure people do it when they're touring to urban centres as well, but that opportunity to go, hey, how can we leverage the fact that you're in our community and value add some other stuff? So that might be some extra performance opportunities. It might be doing some workshops. It might be getting onto a panel. All of that kind of stuff obviously adds to your income and just reduces that risk a little bit. But also from the perspective of our communities, means that we get way more access and we get more out of your big, lovely brains and creative souls. So we want more of that. I have just cheekily mentioned in the comments that we are touring Carolyn Reed's show to Fringe Mac Gambier, so Writers SA, and Carolyn's here in the panel. But as an example, while Carolyn's there, Carolyn's also going to be facilitating a poetry workshop. So, we want to make those other add-ons work. But Michael, can you just comment on, or if you've got any further comments about the demographic that does engage with UNER Perth, if it's the same or different. Yeah.
Yes, I can. So Unearth is like sort of going through changes at the moment, changing times. We used to do a big 2-day free event, so it ran Saturday, Sunday, all day, every day, roving things, family things, music shows, everything, all happening, all in the gardens, all free for the community to come to. And that was great. We got huge range of people engaging with that. But it was also colossally expensive to do because we were putting up everyone and doing this free event. And it was harder, like we had to program things either on the main stage or in tiny little portable venues. So it was harder to produce more community stuff there in those spaces. So in the last few years, we've sort of been transitioning to capacity build with venues around the town and help people do their Fringe registration so they've got a venue and be accessible to be programmed by artists looking for regional venues. So we've got a few this year that got up on the AVR as a venue and got requests to use the site from artists who were just looking to do a tour. So that was really great. And we've got like some sporting clubs involved, and we've got some community halls around the space that are all doing shows. So we're sort of transitioning into fewer big free things and more like ticketed, spread out across the week kind of events. We are a bit more curated because of that at the moment. And it's my first year on the committee. But yeah, so the committee curates a few things, and we do still have a weekend of free family shows. But yeah, other community organizations are able to put up their own shows, and yeah, it's been a really nice transition. It is really hard, like some things are really hard sells in Whyalla. Very sad for me as a theatre maker. Theatre is very hard to sell in Whyalla. But yeah, so family events do really well for us, really. And like you were saying earlier, we really lean towards programming artists who can deliver a few things for our community. So if we have someone who can do a show and do a workshop, we have a few people doing that this year, or someone who's got an adult show and a kids show, like they're really great things that we like to look out for our programming.
Yeah, cool. We've got a question from Casey in the chat just asking, are most of the works based in kind of bricks and mortar venues like indoors, or are they more outdoor kind of events? So yeah, I would say that there's a bit of a mix in most of the communities, and certainly some of the free outdoor events, some of the free family events tend to be outdoors. But I'm also interested in, if I'll get each of you to answer the question for your communities, but I also want to just add to that question and say, can you answer it for what is happening at the moment, but also if you have any thoughts about what the future might look like in terms of the kinds of events and where they happen as well. So we might just go back to front order and start with Michael this time.
All right. We do have a good mix, a good balance of things. We do have a lot of bricks and mortar venues around Whyalla that are being used this year, but we also have some sort of pop-up outdoors events and pop-up music things happening along the foreshore, because we have some really beautiful outdoor spaces in Whyalla. Some things happening in the gardens, so really kind of varied spaces that are being used. We have a few things happening at the theatre. We have a Country Arts SA venue in Whyalla, so there are some bigger shows happening at the venues. There are small shows happening in little halls with no tech capacity at all. Yeah, I think it's really nice to be able to engage lots of different spaces that are underused in our community. Yeah, so halls that don't get used or get used once a week for a yoga class are now going to be used for a whole weekend of shows. Yeah, to get people to enter those spaces, enter community spaces and businesses, and get new audiences through the door is kind of something that we're really interested in seeing at the moment.
Yeah, cool. All right, Eliza, let's flick to you to chat a bit about the kinds of venues. I'm just putting in the comment, just for context for people that aren't familiar with some of these regions, the kinds of venues, indoor venues that are in each place as well. But Eliza, if you want to talk about Soul Festival specifically.
Yeah, so we also have a bit of a mix, but Salt happens at the end of April in Port Lincoln, so you can never guarantee that it's not going to rain or be super windy. So we tend to lean towards indoor venues a bit more. Obviously, considering COVID, outdoor venues are quite appealing because it feels a bit safer, I suppose, for community are more willing to go to outdoor venues at the moment is what we're finding. So we do have a bit of stuff that happens outdoors and then we just cross our fingers and hope that it's not going to rain. But it does also mean you've got to have those backup venues in place as well, which adds a whole another layer of things to think about. So yeah, like our music show last year, we were really lucky. We got a really still, calm night. And as the closing artist was playing their final song, it started to rain. So that worked out quite well, but it doesn't always work that well. So yeah, we lean towards indoor venues currently.
Yeah. And Louise, down at Fringe, Mount Gambier?
Yeah, so like our opening night or street party or Fringeland, you know, it's had different names over the years, but yeah, that's always an outdoor event. You know, there are definitely some challenges with that. Obviously, weather in Mount Gambier as well, cost as well, just for marquees and all that sort of stuff. But I think in terms of the flexibility, without many purpose-built venues, the flexibility for a broad range of artists in that event, we can have height. We can have grass space. We put out dance mats for a different surface. We've got cement. There's different options that we can do, I guess, to get as much diversity into that event. In terms of with venues, I think one of the big, again, and I'm sure we're all in the same boat, there's not that many purpose-built venues. In Mount Gambier, we basically have the main theatre, Sir Robert Herrman. We've got a smaller theatre, Wheel Street Theatre. They both attract quite large costs. So if you've got a self-producing artist to come down, unless they're a bigger name with a bigger budget, even like the smaller Wheel Street Theatre is often not an accessible option to artists who are already, you know, so the artists that have used that smaller theatre, for example, tend to be local artists, so they don't have the travel risks. They know their audience, they've got people that know them. Yeah, so that's a bit of a challenge. There's a venue called The Pantry, which we've done a lot of development with over the last 5 years, and they were our first ticketed Fringe venue, I guess, back in 2018. And, you know, they've really developed. They've now got a permanent stage, permanent production and lighting. Caroline, you're going to be at The Pantry. Yeah. And it tends to be the venue that I do direct artists with, you know, certain production needs. I will tend to direct them there. And they're also an experienced venue, you know, but they have, like lots of regional areas, they have turnover with staff, they've had different venue managers, and some of those challenges can be difficult as well. And it's also not their full-time thing. You know, they're a cafe restaurant. They're not a full-time venue. They open specifically for a venue. So I bring them up as an example, and I think it's the same with any of these non-purpose built venues, I guess, that when artists look at bringing a show either to Mount Gambier or they're a local artist, I think they also need to consider what is it that is benefiting the venue as well. I try to encourage both venue and artists to look at each side of that conversation, because I think that's really important. If it works for both parties and they're both invested in it and they both promote it, it's going to work. As Eliza said, you know, outdoor spaces at the moment in the current climate people tend to feel more comfortable, but that is not always the suitable performance space for the artist. So when I've suggested, for example, a car park space at a pub for a comedian, you know, plenty of drinks, nice stage production, he just said no. He prefers to have that control of the room and of an intimate indoor audience where everyone is sort of looking at you and not worrying about standing at the bar chatting to their mates. Or so, yeah, I think there's definitely a mix, and COVID has seen venues try to be creative. We've also got some quite different to Eliza and Michal, but we've got some really interesting parklands and volcanic spaces. So we've got a cabaret theatre show down in Umfeston Sinkhole this year, which is a big volcanic sinkhole. It'll be interesting to see how it goes, and there's certainly some accessibility issues, but I congratulate her for thinking outside the square. So yeah, I think outdoor venues are great, but I think there's lots of different considerations with venue choice, and it's probably a very big part of what I do with artists and venues is just trying to help find that right match that's going to benefit both of them and reach the target audience as well. That's a really big one too. So yeah,
absolutely. And I think that is a great point too, Louise, about actually having conversations with those local contact points. So, the three of you know your communities, but you also know the other, the technical capabilities that it has, the other people that they might need to talk to. So, for me, that's one of the reasons that a panel like this is happening, is so that people who might be watching can go, oh, actually, I do want to go to SALT, and now I know who Eliza is, so I can ask her some questions, or I do want to go to Fringe Mount Gambier. So for me, that's actually the biggest takeaway I hope people might get from the panel. We have a little bit of time left where I just want to zoom back out away from the specific festivals in each of the communities and just have a little bit more of a discussion around collaborating with regional communities, with regional artists in general. So I'll just give each of you a moment just to think about that, and then we'll go around the room. But I just wanted to, I've lost my train of thought now. I hate it when that happens. There was something I was going to just pick up on what you were saying. Oh, I know what it was. So while you were just having a think about what you want to share about that bigger context about collaborating with regional artists and regional communities, I just wanted to also hone in on another point Louise made about that right match for an artist, right? So if you are thinking about wanting to bring an existing work that you've got to a region as opposed to creating a new collaboration or telling a new story, it's really important that you think through why. Why do I want to go to this community? Why do I want to go to the regions at all? But why do I want to go to this community specifically? Because that's going to help in those conversations that you might have with someone like Louise or Eliza or Michal, in terms of going, do you just want to be there because you just want to show your show to more people? Do you specifically want to test it with a regional audience and leverage that towards maybe a bigger regional tour? Is it that you just really want to go hang out in Port Lincoln and do some shark cage diving? Actually answering that question for yourself is really important. And there's no wrong answer, because whatever your answer is fine, but it's just going to help get the right fit for you in whatever context or venue or whatever you're going to be in. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about just collaborating with regional communities and regional artists more broadly, and especially if there's anyone watching now or watching later who does want to start some conversations around future work or future festivals. Might start with you, Michal. Do you want to just have a little bit, you can answer this question however you want. I've made it very broad.
Yes. I think so. Whyalla, we're really lucky in Whyalla in that we have a powerfully funded youth arts organisation. And then we also have a country arts venue. So we have these two really great places where people are already involved and already doing things. And we have a really vibrant community. It's full of cool stuff. And I think when people come into the community, I think the easiest people to work with who come from outside of the community into the community are people who really understand living regionally, because every single regional place is so different, and it's so different to being in the city to living. I'm really sorry about the noise also. It's lunchtime at the gallery. But these regional communities are so small and everyone knows everyone and they're so tight-knit. It's quite hard to understand if you come from outside of those communities. And I think often we get people who come into the community, who are brought into the community, who are all amazing artists making amazing work, but it doesn't quite fit within our context and within the audiences we have and with what we engage with. And so, yeah, regional communities require really specific things. Like, we don't get lots of people going to an opera show because that's just too big for our space in Whyalla. So yeah, I think I'm sort of rambling a bit trying to get to my point, but I think to just like do your research on the community you're going to and make sure you are the right fit for that community, or you have some kind of connection to it, or you know someone who's really going to advocate for you and who believes in what you're bringing in. Because yeah, it is really hard to present work to a regional community. And it can be, yeah, it can just be hard.
Feel free if you want to add any other thoughts in the chat as well as the three of us go around. Louise, I might throw to you. So yeah, what are some of your tips or thoughts around collaborating with people who want to start new collaborations with regional communities and regional artists?
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that I don't think there's anyone on that is from Mount Gambier, but yeah, I think in terms of collaborating with regional artists or organizations, I guess, I think, your first point of call is to contact someone who is living there. So that might be myself or someone else on our committee. That might be Country Arts SA. That might even be council, which comes through to us. It might be a venue. There's lots of different ways I think you can sort of, get into having a conversation. But yeah, in the context of this, I'm a pretty good start. And I know probably the vast, maybe not all, but I know quite a big chunk of artists that do live in the area. And if not, then I can sort of direct you to maybe who might in that particular genre, if that's not, my strong sort of knowledge base. So I think that's definitely a first point of call, is to make contact with someone who's living there. There's in the past, we've had a couple of ways where collaborations have evolved. So we ran a program called Experience Fringe. And that was an idea of, for example, with dance, we brought in a Sydney choreographer and some out-of-town dancers that did intensive training workshops, and then basically choreographed a piece of work with dancers from some of our many dance schools in the region. It's a really strong genre of art in the Southeast. That was pretty amazing, because I think for the visiting artists and the visiting choreographer, it expanded their their reach and their experience, and something for them to add on to their resume and, hopefully gain further work. But for our dancers that were living regionally, which some of them are just of an incredible standard, that chance to work with professional choreographers who are based in the city and doing this for their full-time work, that sort of experience is amazing too. So that was something that we facilitated. And that was a matter of finding a local curator in the dance industry here who had some of those connections, because, that's not my area. So that was, there was a few ways that sort of happened. Another example of collaboration has been one of our music acts, Fiona Unger. So she's a local musician, and she started off with Fringe Mount Gambier, and then now she presents at Adelaide Fringe each year. And I think that pathway has, lent her to meeting other musicians who have either, become part of her show, or, just further connections there. Another connection or collaboration point is at our curated event in the green room. Any artists would know that the green room can be a great opportunity to have a chat and sort of make connections, get an email. Those sorts of things are really great opportunities too. When we try to sort of facilitate some of that some of those meetings. Another example was, where I say an artist from abroad, well, from interstate or in the city getting in touch. We had a drag king performer from Sydney get in touch last week, and they wanted to bring their show to Mount Gambier, but we had a discussion, and so the result was that they're actually tagging into, as a guest performer, an existing drag show that's part of the festival. So they're collaborating with local drag performers with the idea that next year, with a newer, more complete understanding of Mount Gambier and the demographic and how the festival works, they will bring their own produced show from Sydney and take that risk with traveling for artists. So, you know, and that result just came from a conversation, I guess, whereas if they hadn't had that, they might have just registered their act, you know, and then regional areas are funny. If everyone goes to the locally produced show the weekend before, I don't know, maybe they've had their fix, I'm not sure. So making those connections, and, you know, particularly if you've never visited the town before, I think is really important. And yeah, collaborations can happen in so many different ways. So yeah, just put your feelers out, and I'd love to see a lot more. I'd like to see, you know, I'd like to see a lot more in lots of genres, because I think, you know, theatre is a great example, but, you know, comedians are fantastic at collaborating with shows. Like, they love to be on a, you know, a mixed lineup. And I think you can really tell that when you talk to comedians and they know everyone. They don't like to do a show on the same night as another comedian if they can help it, you know, in a regional town. Obviously unavoidable in Adelaide. But yeah, so there's lots of opportunities, and from a regional perspective and for our program, I'd love to see more of it, and I really think it would be something we could fund as well in the future. So if you are thinking about it, whether it's visual art, theatre, spoken word, circus, cabaret, anything, just reach out to us, because I'm sure Eliza and Michael and I were all the same. We want to see that happen more because it helps everyone. Absolutely.
Eliza, anything you want to add about collaborating with regional artists, regional communities?
Yeah, so just that thing about a conversation, like it is super helpful to get that context. So unlike Michael, so Walla's 3.5 hours drive from here, but the difference into our context, as opposed to what Michael was saying, we have a youth arts company, but they're not funded, and we don't have a country arts SA venue. We're soon getting a country arts SA cultural facilitator, but at the moment we don't have anyone dedicated to that in that sort of capacity. So yeah, worth having those conversations, because it changes the context. There's differences around finding funding for the collaboration, and also it just needs a bit more time, because you're working with volunteers, so people that are giving up their time to do these things, do the admin, do the organising of the collaboration before it's even happened. So yeah, definitely worth reaching out and just getting that background info.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Eliza. I think, you know, and I'm sure we're all in the same boat. We're very reliant on volunteer hours, you know, and typically small committees as well. So yeah, you know, we all do try to facilitate as much as we can, but yeah, definitely just getting in touch. It might take a little bit of time, but yeah, we can definitely help. Hopefully.
I think there's something you touched on in what you were saying before too, Louise, about I can't remember the exact words you use now, but just that idea too of like something that starts somewhere can also go somewhere else. So that the importance of those kind of longer term conversations and collaborations, that you don't just kind of fly in, do your thing and leave. It's actually about building a relationship with the community and with the collaborators there. So you might come that first time and be part of something else, and then you kind of get a bit of context and relationships and can come back with something bigger. Getting lots of lunchtime noise. Casey, just in the comments. Oh, sorry, Louise. Do you want to add something?
I was just going to say that the Sydney performer that rang last week as well, to their credit, they actually did ask if there were any local drag performers as well. So they were thinking maybe they could incorporate into a show. And then when we sort of spoke about it, was like, well, maybe the other way around makes more financial sense, and building that relationship. And the locally based drag performers were just absolutely stoked, because for them, the conversation has already happened that if they go to Sydney, you know, they would be able to feature in Laura's show as a guest performer. So those pathways are building. And Laura's also, you know, planning for next year. Not only will I just come to Mount Gambier, but I'll register for Adelaide Fringe and do a Drag King a show there. You know, so it's like, yeah, sort of the train sort of starts rolling. And next time I talk to her, I'll tell her about the other regional opportunities as well. I mean, might have a whole tour.
Absolutely. And I think that segues really well into Casey's question in the comments. So Casey was just asking, do you ever collaborate as a collective to support a tour of artists across those venues? And there's not necessarily a formal structure around that, although there is a couple of things that I am going to put in the comments. So one of those is around the South Australian Regional Performing Arts kind of mini network. So there is some opportunities through that. And Country Out to Say, as well as the 4 venues that I mentioned before in the comments, also has their shows on the road kind of touring program. So there is some other opportunities around those kinds of things if you do want to create a bit of a connected tour. But definitely contact all of these 3 people in the panel if you are thinking about that kind of thing. Haneen's also just in the comments mentioned that Haneen used to work for Darwin Fringe, and just mentioning that Darwin Fringe is always open to conversations about collaboration and chatting about how people might be able to incorporate a tour into their festival as well. So, you know, it's that thing about thinking about, it's not always directly where you are. It's not always the big festivals. We don't always have to go to Sydney and Melbourne. We can go to Perth, and we can go to Darwin, and we can go to the regions, and there's other kinds of opportunities. So we have just hit 12 o'clock though, so I am going to wrap us up, but I do just want to ask each of our panelists to share just one like your dream thing that you would love to have come to your community. It could be a specific performer or a specific show or a kind of show, but just one like dream thing that you would love to come and have visit your community. I might start with, it's mean because I don't think I told you that question in the email chat, so now you're having to think of it off the top of your head. But I might start with you, Eliza.
Yeah, tough question. Top of my head, I would say just theatre, generally theatre. It's an underrepresented genre that we don't get to experience here, so that'd be it.
Okay, beautiful. More theatre in Port Lincoln, yes. What about you, Michael? What do you want to have come to you in Whyalla?
Because I didn't know this question was going to come, it's going to be a very selfish answer, just because it's things I want to see. But I am really interested in really immersive experimental theatre, and I think, like Eliza said, we don't see a lot of that come to us. We see a lot of very traditional theatre work coming, and I just want to see some weird, cool stuff.
All right, so more theatre in Port Lincoln and more weird, cool stuff in Whyalla. Love it.
Yeah.
And what about you in Mount Gambier, Louise?
Oh God. I think in 2020 we had the festival cancelled like a week before, and there was a theatre show called oh my God, Eurydice. Oh my God, what was it called? Lisa, you know what I'm talking about. I've been caught off guard.
Eurydice. It was a trilogy that had 3 different.
From the UK. Anyway,
at the Holden Street Theatres.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
But that
was a maternity leave.
I've had a mind blank, but we're probably on the same boat there. I think it was a really seemingly unassuming show, and it just blew me away. It was incredible. So it was theatre, music, it was incredible. And it was very surprising. So that was amazing. Chucky Mala are still on my hit list. I'd love to see them. I think we've been trying since 2018, but I think there was another show, also, UK, but which was Frankenstein or something.
Oh, I know the one you're talking about. I can't.
It was a real hit at Adelaide Fringe, but I think same as the girls. I mean, I think theatre, weird and curious, and just to really pique regional audiences' minds, because my experience is when they're exposed to something, their eyes, you know, like audiences' eyes really light up in regional areas. I know mine do, when you just see something you don't normally see there, and you look around and you feel really proud about where you live and how audiences in your community respond to those sort of performances. It's a really amazing feeling. I'm sure it's probably why we all do what we do. So.
Absolutely. And I would say, just as a final comment, you know, touring to the regions, obviously we don't have the scale of large centres. So you're not going to, you know, pack out theatres with thousands of people. But although it might be smaller scale, that feeling of impact that Louise just touched on, like when you look out into that crowd and you hear their feedback afterwards, there is nothing like that in my experience. It is really, really special to work closely and meaningfully with community. So we will wrap it up there because we've gone over 12 o'clock. But thank you so much for joining us live, those of you that have, and for anyone watching the recording afterwards. And lucky last, thank you so much, Eliza, Louise and Michal, for your time today and sharing some of your expertise. Hopefully everyone will be hitting you up over email afterwards. And yeah, that's all. I'd
just like to also jump in. Thank you so much, Alysha. That was excellent. It was just so lovely to listen to everyone, but also yourself. That was just a really great panel. I want to just also double check that everyone is aware of our our Facebook group. We've got regular bulletins that are coming out. We also do monthly professional development sessions, which are all Zoomed all throughout the year. We're really committed to getting professional development for artists happening. We've got the arts industry, our Adelaide Fringe Arts Industry Collaboration Program, where we're really trying to find opportunities for professional development for artists, and we'd love to have more regional artists and regional opportunities happening throughout the year and through Fringe time as well. So let's hope this conversation continues. Thank you so much, everyone.
100% more regional stuff. Yay. Bye, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.